So can we do some quick introductions?
Mauro Cantalamessa, Trumbull County Commissioner.
Mike Salamone, Trumbull County Administrator. ODOT, Chuck, you want to start and go next?
Chuck Dyer, ODOT Office Administrator, Office of Transit.
I'm Spencer Smith. I'm the Urban Transit Coordinator for ODOT.
Dean Harris, Executive Director for WRTA.
Okay, thank you. I just want to give you a quick recap of what kind of service we're running real fast. I sent an agenda out, hopefully everybody got it. But quick rundown real fast. Trumbull County Transit's been running based on on-demand system for the last several years for senior and disabled, and about somewhere between a 1.6 $1.7 system. We were running WRTA was also running some fixed routes here for about $1 million, give or take. I think about 5 routes total.
Yep.
During this time, we produced about 37,000 trips. However, again, only doing senior disabled. We're not doing anything with general public. So that's basically a quick rundown of our service at this point. So my first question really is, can Trumbull County become a 5307 designee or recipient or subrecipient?
Legally, sure. There's a path. And it just requires the, you have, Trumbull County has open issues with FTA. Those are between you guys and FTA. That was mentioned in Deidre's response to you, Mike, I believe. Currently,
those issues have been addressed, I thought.
I don't know. I'm not. I just remember, I thought Deidre mentioned that there's some outstanding issues.
Not that I know
from the previous triennial. I don't know. I would just recommend you reach out to FTA to understand any potential obstacles with that you have with FTA. I can't speak for them.
Well, what happened, Chuck, when I asked them the original question about 5307 designee, they said that's a local decision. So we got to make the decision here first before it goes up to that.
So the way it works is, Dean Spencer chime in here if I'm starting to spit out something that's not true or throw down something that's not true. The way it works is that it is a local decision, right? Where that designation resides. It's the governor's responsibility to designate that. Well, what's required to submit to the governor's office is a resolution from the Metropolitan Planning Organization that shows support for this. And then the required review from an attorney, I believe, is what 5307 requires as well. The attorney's review of the designation as well. So you would have to have a designated body that meets FDA's requirements in terms of a board, et cetera, as well. But the local process is kind of vetted through the MPO, which is overseeing the entire metropolitan organization. Dean, did I get that right?
Okay, so it's saying that, Chuck, is there some financial part of this that we would also have to have, or how does that work? Do you know?
Yeah, when you speak a little bit more to your question, financial part of the application,
I'm saying,
designation.
Okay. Do we have to have some financial stability? I mean, that was one of the problems that we did have when the triennial review, the financial stability, DBE, and Title VI. Those have all been cleared up. The financial stability is our big question here.
What does financial stability mean?
Like a dedicated revenue source?
A dedicated revenue source?
Yeah, I mean, to use the grants, you're going to have match money, right? So FTA is going to require they have the capacity to administer the grants, right? Whoever the designated authority is. So there are requirements with financial capacity and financial procedures, et cetera, associated with that. So you're not really asking about that, are you, Mike? You're asking about.
That's kind of what I'm asking about. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, FTA lays out what the requirements are associated with managing its grants. Circular 5010, I believe, if I remember correctly. And associated with that grant administration comes all the other requirements associated, which I'm going to guess familiar with in your history, Mike. But But you're right. Every grant that you become a designated recipient for, let's say Trumbull County, as part of this UZA, right? It's still the MPOs who develop the split agreements between all parties within the UZA. We're fortunate enough that the UZA now does not include a section of Pennsylvania. So
Correct.
we're really looking at Mahoning and Trumbull counties within the UZA. And so the FTA and the MPO will do the split agreement for the 5307 and any 5339 funds. The 5310 funds are being administered through Office of Transit. And so we're just accepting applications from the entire region for those projects. And that'll stay unchanged moving forward.
Okay. So it is possible that we could become, if we get financially stable, we could become a 5307 designee.
Working through the MPO
Right.
in the entire region.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Let's see the next question. Presently, which you know, Chuck, we are receiving the 5310 funds. Are there any other state funding that we can get at this time without being a 5307 or 5310 designee?
And here's what I'm not going to speak to the technical aspects. I'm just going to speak to the nuts and bolts of what we need here in Trumbull County. We had the 5 routes, I believe, through WRTA through the pilot program or the grant. And what I envision is, some of those routes were very well used and utilized. Some of them were just really sort of non-existent, not necessary. I think the total cost of that would have been like $1 million. I have a colleague who keeps saying we need to pass a sales tax for $7 million, but I don't want to get into the weeds about the politics of it, but I don't think we need a $7 million system. We need something that's a little bit more tailor-made to what our needs are. And I'm thinking more of like a $1 million to $3 million system, and augmented with some fixed routes, some of what we do already with our senior and disabled. And I think we can, I think that's a great plan moving forward. The problem is there's no funding on the state level for. It just seems like everything's pushed towards, well, you got to join WRTA, and there's no assistance if you want to just contract with WRTA on some fixed routes to augment what we want to do. And that's really what I'm looking for, because I'll tell you right now, our area demographics are kind of eclectic and all over the board, because I would say 90% of our riders are from the Niles Warren area, and we have a large, obviously geographic footprint in Trumbull County. And I don't think, actually I know, because the Trumbull Township Association has voted as such, not one township will supports, public transportation or putting it on the ballot for a sales tax increase. So with that being said, I thought there would be some sort of partnership with the state and with Dean and potentially with the city of Warren, because that's where the lion's share of the customers are coming from. I'd say probably 80 to 90% are coming from the city of Warren. If we can sort of go after sort of a tailor-made system where we're augmenting like 3 or 4 or 5, maybe depending on the price, fixed routes to go along with our system that we have now, to just sort of, as I said, at the end of the day, I'd love to, a $7 million system, but I think it's spending money that we don't necessarily need to spend on a system. And with times being tough for everybody right now, I don't think it's going to be looked on very favorably at all. So I'm trying to not even go down that road right now, and just seeing if we can piece together sort of a piecemeal system to help us, because that pilot program was very successful. I had no complaints for transportation during that time. Mike, you had very little complaints. I think a lot of people's needs were being met. And, I think I do believe that we need fixed routes. I just don't believe we need $7 million worth of fixed routes in a $7 million system. So that's
where's the $7 million coming from?
Well, a 0.25% sales tax in Trumbull County equates to roughly $7 million.
To join.
Is that what WRTA sales tax is?
Yeah.
It's a quarter of a, yeah, it's 1/4%. You can't do 0.1%. You can't join at that. Unless the state has changed their legislation or whatever.
Right, see,
you can
that's,
do that.
Chuck, that's what the problem is. And Dean, jump in here because you're the one that found this out. But to join WRTA, we have to be the same sales tax as what they are. They're 1/4%, and 1/4% here is $7 million
Roughly, I mean, that's what it equates to every
at
year.
this point. So Dean, you wanna?
Yeah, so just
It's a
basically,
hard sell, in other words, you know.
yeah, so in order for them to be part of our service area, our tax follows us. So the $7 million we're talking about is because of the 1/4% we have in Mahoney would then be included in the Trumbull. So that is an accurate statement.
Okay, so when we talked about this in the past, it was this concept about, Trumbull County Transit Board was no longer eligible to receive federal funds, and we were talking about WRTA coming in to provide the service in Trumbull County, and the long part of that conversation was eventually WRTA's service area could be expanded. It could be expanded to the city. It could be expanded in many different ways. And then, Commissioner, what I'm hearing from you is like Trumbull County isn't interested in getting a 1/4% sales tax equivalent to what WRTA is hosting. So you're asking then. You asked two different questions. Is there funding from the state to support Trumbull County's goals for public transit? And then you asked about, right? Is that right?
Yeah, to support some fixed routes here in Trumbull County and assistance in that way.
And then you asked about like I just want to be clear, I understand the second part of the question. You talked about like a subcontracting opportunity. What was the idea behind that kind of approach?
As opposed to joining WRTA and being a part of that, can we contract with them and just be, we can do these 4 routes with WRTA and not necessarily be a part of WRTA, if that makes sense.
Chuck, there's one other thing regarding the sales tax vote. And again, Dean, you're the one that found out, your lawyer did. But the way I understand it is Trumbull County could say no, Mahoney County could say yes, people-wise, and it's gonna be the total between Mahoney and Trumbull. So it could be voted down here by, let's say, 150,000 say no, but 200,000 say yes in Mahoney County, which I'm high on the numbers, I know. But then it would actually be passed. So that's the other part of it.
It's just another impediment for us to try to pass this thing or put it on the ballot.
Or it could go the other way. Where
Well, it's the local decision to put on the ballot or not, right?
Right.
But you guys are just
But
saying
when you have to sell it with those guidelines, and when those are revealed, to the public, they don't seem to digest that very well.
Yeah, Dean, if you want to, maybe you can explain it better than what I just did.
No, you did a good job. It's just basically the way the law is written. You have to vote in the whole district. So our district right now is Mahoning. So if we expand the Trumbull, it still includes Mahoning. So it does require a vote of Mahoney residents to vote on a tax that doesn't affect them. So it's a weird law way the law is written, but it is the way it is. So again, like Commissioner
when my constituents here, we're going to put this on, but to be completely honest with you, you don't control your own destiny on this.
Right.
It doesn't sit well with them.
Right. So I think they're looking. Yeah, but basically what you're looking at is, what can Trumbull County do with what they have available, and what can the state do to help them? And then the contracting question is yes, that's possible. It's really the main question for Trumbull is the funding problem. How does Trumbull find funds to provide whatever level of service they can provide, and how much can the state help them with that funding?
Exactly.
Yeah. So I don't know the tax law very well to understand, how I am familiar with that. For whatever reason, it's pretty frustrating. The slowest you can go, I think, is 1/4%. Or something with transit. So I have heard that before. I agree that's frustrating. In terms of like other ways that you can generate taxes within your taxable region or county or whatever. I'm sure there are other opportunities to generate revenue. I'm not going to be too familiar with what those are. You can pull it off of your GRF, your general revenue funds that you create already. Like we've seen that in different parts of the state. There are contracting opportunities with federal investments. So CCAM, Coordinating Council Access Mobility, develops a fund grading guide that demonstrates which federal funds can be matched up to FTA dollars to provide
Can you say
service.
the name of it? I'm sorry, Chuck, can you say the name of it?
I'll try to put do we have a chat box in this system? Yeah. I'll try to put that in the chat box. CCAM through FTA. So they have a Coordinating Council on Access, access and mobility. So they have a fund grading guide document, and the fund grading document shows which federal funds can be matched to which federal funds. And so it's quite surprising. There's quite a bit in there. The most obvious that's utilized within the state is contract revenue through human service transportation. So your jobs and family services, JFS for Trumbull County issues contracts for transportation. Aging does it, DD does it, etc. And those contracted trips can be used as match in a system. And so the fund grading guide describes that. In terms of state dollars, our state dollars are only awarded to public transit agencies. So we do have an urban transit program that we do award state dollars. So WRTA receives the in the current setup, because WRTA is the recipient for the entire UZA, they receive the portion of UTP, which is the urban transit program. They receive the portion of the urban transit program that comes to this UZA. If there was two different designations of public transit entities within the UZA, that apportionment would be split differently. And maybe Spencer's able, after this meeting, to develop some sort of estimate to understand what that may look like, but it's based off of how the $5,307 are split within the UZA region.
That would be determined by the MPO. So your MPO would determine the split of the 5,307, and then proportionally to that 5,307 through the UTP, you'd receive roughly about 13 to 15% GRF to match that 5,307 that was determined by the MPO.
And that's all happens after you have a designation as a public transit entity within the state.
Yeah,
i.e. receiving $5,307.
Right. Yeah. In the past, we received somewhere between 550 and 600,000.
Yeah, the formula has changed slightly, but I don't know what it would be today. So the funding levels have changed. There's been a lot of different factors that would impact where that ultimately ends. So we do have that eligible after and if you become a designated recipient of 5,307 funds, and it's basically a formula that follows, the portion of 5,307 funding. So that's outside of that. We do have the OTP2 program, which where public transit entities are able to apply for competitive dollars. There's federal dollars and there's state dollars that fund that program. The state dollars are very limited in it. It's like a $37 million program. Only $4 million are GRF, $33 million are federal dollars. So those $4 million of GRF is highly competitive in that OTP2 project. But operating assistance and is an eligible activity to apply for underneath that program. But so there's not a bunch of state dollars to assist with local match. Largely, when we look at how taxes are collected in Ohio, when we look at the large 8 urban systems in Ohio, they collect their tax at the local level. Ohio is a home rule state. That's kind of the direction we went. So if we were to compare ourselves to Pennsylvania collects the public transit tax at the state level, distributes it back down through the DOT to each county. In Ohio, the state does contribute some general revenue funds, but they don't have a dedicated tax. The only dedicated taxes for transits are at the local level. There is an example of a smaller urban transit in Ohio that does have a local tax, Allen County. Spencer, did you want to make a comment about what Allen County's doing? The 1%, 0.1%.
Yeah, so Allen County, they're a small urban, right? So they're and they get money through governor's apportionment. So they have more of a relationship with the state than Trumbull County would, or WRTA does because of that. And they did in 2019, they passed a 0.1% sales tax. So there is some way to pass a sales tax less than the 0.25%, but that doesn't, right, but that's not what RTAs or WRTA's
Right.
region or district sales tax is. So that's possible. It is possible to pass a less than 0.25% sales tax legally in the state.
And then make investments into public transportation. So
Right.
we're not as familiar with what Allen County is doing, but that can be investigated.
Yep, I think Trumbull would have to form their own RTA to do that.
That's my question. You'd have to form your own RTA though.
Right.
You would. And when you form your own RTA, there would be a board that provides oversight, and then that board, that RTA would be the designated recipient for the 5307 funds and the UTP funds that follows those dollars. There's other RTAs in the state that aren't in the major metropolitan organizations, like Southeast Area Transit that operates in Muskegon and Guernsey County is an RTA as well. RTA is recognized in Ohio Revised Code as a governmental entity that has the ability to tax themselves.
So basically, Chuck, what you're saying is unless we become a 5307, there's no other funding through the state that we can get at this point
For
transportation.
to fund transportation, right? Because we wouldn't be able to afford to fund it at 100%. We would need federal dollars to match, right?
Okay. So, and one of my questions on here that I just I thought about a couple of days ago was, can the commissioners do it? Can the commissioners go through put a WRTA together? So the answer I think is yes to that. You sent me something, Spencer, in the mail. So you want to elaborate?
Yeah, I just sent you the chapter of ORC that outlines how a county or municipalities can form or get go into a RTA. That's really all that. Like that is like the
Right.
ORC. It's really not for being law. It's really not that complicated.
No, and I've seen it before, so I know how it works. But my main question was, even though WRTA is right next door, we still can do our own WRTA then.
Yeah, there's nothing explicitly that I've seen that would prevent that.
Okay. So that's another possibility too then. Okay, now my one or two more questions I basically have. Okay, Chuck, this may be a question more for you, and this is coming from one of our other commissioners. He keeps talking about pass-through money. Would you mind explaining what pass-through money is, and can we get it from WRTA? Because that's what he's thinking, that we can get pass-through money from WRTA.
Pass-through money. So pass-through entity is an organization that receives the allocation and then makes subawards and has oversight beyond it. So I don't know of what that relationship could look like unless, so you're saying, I guess I don't know the basis of what he's expressing. ODOT is the pass-through entity for 5311 funds for rural areas. But
Okay.
ODOT is not the pass-through entity for any 5307 funds across the state. That's a direct relationship with FTA. And I don't know of any situation where an entity like WRTA would be the pass-through to another organization, and because you just assume so much risk when you're doing that, right? when you're the pass-through. And so I'm not aware of anyone in the state where they pass through 5307 from one organization to the next, if I'm understanding what you're asking correctly.
Well,
I'm not sure what he was asking.
okay, yeah, I mean, it was at one of his meetings, he's talking about pass-through, and he's brought this up a couple different times. And the other thing that I remember pass-through is where an RTA will pass money down to some, like what I did in Medina, where it was passed money down from Cleveland, where the money was, they gave us, what was it, local money.
Yeah, that's not quite a pass-through, because
No.
that was arrangements made through the split agreement. In the split agreement, you guys agreed that Medina County is eligible for 20%, and they're going to fund that 20% with
Right.
10% federal, 10% local. So that wasn't any pass-through in that one.
No, that's not pass. I can't remember what it was called, but there was a name for it.
But yeah, I don't know if that there's a name for it. The federal government, FTA, calls it the Ohio way. I think it's a unique opportunity that Ohio takes advantage of. And then the way it would work in this situation, pending WRTA's willingness to contribute, would be that, so the split agreement between Trumbull County and Mahoning County shows 50-50 per se, to keep it simple. And the 5307 award is $10,000. So instead of paying $5,000 to WRTA, they give you $2,500 in federal and then $2,500 in local cash. But then WRTA would actually keep $750 of that dollars versus the $5,000,
Right.
$7,500. If that makes sense. I kind of got a little complicated in my example. But
Right. And what it was,
exchange of funds.
yeah. And what it was, they had more than enough local money, but they didn't have enough for capital. So
Yeah.
we gave our capital, and they gave us the local, so we could use the local for anything we wanted.
Yeah, it doesn't actually. It just allows you it creates an opportunity for some more match, but it reduces the total investment in the county because you're subsidizing some federal funds for.
Right. But again, you've got to be a 5307 designee to do that. So.
And you also have to make sure that you are not passing the additional requirements from FTA for the 5307 operating cap. So there's limits on how much operating can be used for, how much of 5307 can be used for operating.
Right. Yeah.
So that's going to become an issue.
That was the other part. Like I said, when I was in Medina, we did this. So I remember, I think even Claremont, we did it too, but I don't remember.
Yeah, that was part of the split agreement, which was in negotiations with the MPO. I believe NOACA has a transit board committee that meets to decide upon those agreements. It's also a common practice shared by the Columbus UZA and Dayton UZA.
Okay. I got one last question, and then I don't know if you have any other questions.
Maybe, yeah.
The commissioners again had asked me to ask you, Chuck, and maybe this is too early, too late, I don't know. Can ODOT help fund a study on how to provide transportation down here, maybe through RTA or something? And not RTA, I mean RLS or something. And I know I've heard one was done about 10 years ago. That's what Martha Yoder said at one of the meetings.
It was less than 10 years ago.
Yeah. So I don't even know if they even have that and where that's at.
You're saying the last transit development plan was over 10 plus years ago, you think?
I don't believe that's accurate.
Yeah. It was just our auditor came to one of the meetings and said she was reading something that RLS did that kind of laid out how we could do transportation here.
Okay, so in terms of funding so I'm going to call this a transportation development plan. That's the kind of general terminology that's used, TDP. And so a transportation development plan can lay out, it can bring stakeholders together and lay out goals and expectations for what the service can look like, what the funding could look like, and pull together all the existing conditions and demographics associated with making those decisions. And so TDPs can range in many different costs. ODOT just shortlisted, Spencer, do you remember, I think it's 5 different contractors that allows public transit agencies governmental agencies to purchase off of. so you don't have to go through the procurement process. So we have like 5 different contractors shortlisted that met the procurement requirements to do a transit development plan. In terms of the funding, I would argue that the Trumbull County area is eligible to use some of the 5307 funds within the UZA for a TDP. So currently, that's through you, Dean. So Dean, would you agree a portion of 5307 funds to fund a transit development plan for WRTA? The match money would have to come from Trumbull County.
Right, and that would probably be almost 4 years out because we are, with the TIP, 4 years out on our funding. Unless it was pretty cheap, there might be a little bit of room here and there, depending on funding.
What's cheap to you, Dean?
Well, yeah, 20, 30,000. So we could probably squeeze that out if they could match it.
We can talk about that. I would encourage. I don't know about opportunities for funding for a transit development plan for Trumbull County.
Here's the thing, I don't think we need a plan. I think we know what we need. We just need assistance. So
You need what? Assistance?
We need financial assistance. We're willing to pony up some money, but is the state willing to help? That's what it comes down to.
The state's willing to include you when you're when you're part of that, when you're a public transit entity, because the GRF dollars.
You're not eligible for any funding. I mean, unless you're 53.
To support operations?
Yes.
No, we don't fund. We only fund public transit entities in the state with our operations. So you want the state to provide funding for.
So if we wanted to contract with WRTA for 5 routes, and we wanted to put X amount of dollars, you couldn't match any money to that?
What kind of?
Or we'd have to put on sales tax. Is that what you're saying?
So you wanted to contract with WRTA.
Correct.
The way, our criteria within our existing programs is only eligible for public transit agencies.
Criteria is worthless. It doesn't help communities like ours. It's terrible. So what would happen if we tried to put the sales tax on and it got shot down? What would you do then? Would you help us at all?
The first
be on our own.
The first well, in Ohio, the first step is becoming a designated 5307, right? That puts you as a public transit entity able to apply to the different programs we have in place. And through that process, you're going to be receiving some state funds through the UTP Urban Transit Program, right? That you can use as match. And so there would be the formula funds that's through the UTP program and the opportunity to apply for competitive grants. After you're designated recipient.
How long typically does that process take to become a 5307? Typically, I know you're not going to give me an answer, but somebody give me something.
It doesn't happen very often where people are trying to start from scratch. It's your MPO's. It's going to be up to your MPO's process. If you're asking me to put a time frame to it, I would say up to 6 months. I think. But I would ask the MPO how quickly they can come to a supporting resolution for it. That's Eastgate.
Okay, let me ask you this then. Let's go back to 5007 for a second. Let's say it's 6 months down the road, we've been approved. How quickly, again, maybe you don't know the answer to this, Chuck, but how quickly do you have to start running transportation off that money?
How quickly do you have to start operating public transit?
Yeah, in other words, we've gone 6 months, we've got the 5007 designee. And I know, like with federal money, you've got a year to use it or 2 years to use it once it's in your system. So
you have, this would be a big discussion within the MPO region about how the existing 5307 funds are allocated. So there'd be a discussion with the Eastgate about how to reprogram the existing funds that are currently out there. And then you have to follow the federal grants process, Mike, right? So you become a designee and then you work to get an allocation through the next funding cycle, right? And then you have to write the grant, and then you're drawing those funds down. You have to draw the funds down until whatever you put in the grant, the period of performance of the grant. But you have 3 years from the date the funds were, the year that they were you have 5 years from the year that they were apportioned to give it into a grant.
Okay, that's, I mean,
That's a long time.
I knew there were numbers, I just couldn't remember. I thought it was 3 years, but okay, so we'd have 3 years to put something together then at that point with those funds.
Yeah, but I would expect you would probably operate a little quicker than that.
Right.
Yeah, there's no time limiting you how quickly you can get through that process. But the way the federal funds flow, the apportionments are put out there. The MPO creates a split agreement with the participating agencies within that UZA, and then once that split agreement letter is posted, then you're allowed to come in for those funds. That's how FTA works.
Correct, and then that's when you write the grant between
And start
Point A
drawing down
B.
against it.
and get the money. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Commissioner, there really isn't funds available to support, like startups of public transits and stuff. It's really challenging to find eligible funds for that. The money we do have is for the way the criteria is built is for public transits.
Yeah, we're just trying to get people right, that's all.
Yeah, I understand. The 5310 is going to be an important aspect of that program, right? So you're currently providing a decent amount of trips, but you're talking about how to expand that. And it's really hard without that local match component involved, right? To give you that control. And the GRF that's supporting
We'd be willing to put up a local match. That's the thing. We know that we have to have the game. It's just
yeah. Yeah, I hear you. How quickly is Trumbull County interested in trying to get service back?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
How quickly is Trumbull County interested in trying to get service back on some of those routes?
I'd like to get some of those fixed routes back immediately.
So, Dean, I got a question for you. And I'm trying to remember how we did this in the past, where you wrote the grant for us, and then we had a separate contract with that. And I know it would have to be next year if we did that. Do you remember what I'm talking about?
Right, we did a small portion of our 307 fund for operating assistance.
Okay.
And that's possible to a degree. Again, it may take a while because we have a bunch of projects coming up that are going to be using up almost all our funding because we've been saving the money for a couple of big projects.
Okay.
So that's why I'm a little leery about saying what's available at this point, because I don't know. We don't know what our allocation is going to be, especially with the new UZA change. So our money actually might drop.
Right.
Go ahead.
No, go on.
My advice for Trumbull County, if you're not going to be joining the WRTA, right? That you made that clear. That's not the path forward for Trumbull County, and that's fine. It's a local decision. It's perfectly fine. So my advice to Trumbull County is work with your MPO to move through that process of becoming a designated for your service area within the UZA. I think that would be the most important thing that you guys do to get back to finding eligible funds. I mean, we do have other 5307 funds, and this is, I'm not going to get into the weeds, but there's the state's responsible for managing lapsing 5307 funds that are within other UZAs. And don't be surprised to find out that there are portions of the state where there's lapsing UZA. The MPO can flex funds from FHWA to 5307, right? But you have to be a FTA designated recipient to receive those funds. So again,
Right.
the sooner that you guys as a Trumbull County can get yourselves organized with the metropolitan organization to get that designation letter with the required information to ODOT, the sooner we can push it on the governor's desk for signature, thus creating you guys as a designation pending whatever FTA may require.
Right, and that, I understand what you're talking about, Chuck, because again, when I was in Medina, Lorraine County wasn't using their money. So that money used to always go back out every year.
Yeah, and so there are other federal funds that we can
Yeah.
reapportion to different UZAs, based on need that's out there. But again, and then you can use your local money to, match it. But again, you're gonna have to be that designation before you're eligible to receive it.
Okay.
Okay.
So one last question for Dean then, and I apologize. So Dean, are in regards to your capital, are you thinking 1 year out, 2 years out?
24. So yeah, 25 would probably be, because once we know what the 24 numbers are, it makes it a lot easier. But I don't know when we're ever going to see 24 numbers. I mean, they've got 6 months before they have to do a apportionment for 24. And
Yeah.
the way Congress is doing continued resolutions, we may never even make it to the 6-month mark. That will tell us a better idea of what we're going to get in the future.
Okay.
So 25 is again, I'm talking federal years here. 25, so that is a safer year because we'll know what the trend line is, at least for the next, I think it's 3 years left on the infrastructure bill at that point. So we'll know. And then after that, it really probably got to drop off after that.
Okay. No, I mean, that helps a little bit because, so we've got a couple different options, like I said,
Well,
go on.
well, if we wanted to contract with Dean for some routes up until we get our designation, is that something we can discuss, Dean?
Yeah, we can discuss that anytime. I mean, we don't need.
Obviously, the state's not going to assist. But that's
Yeah,
okay.
if you don't care about getting any match, yeah, we can do that anytime.
I don't know if that's a possibility. So.
Well, Dean, off the top of your head, do you know when your next run board's coming out?
Let's see. So it was September. So I think December's the next one.
Yeah. So let's just say December 1st, because the other one was the 8th.
Yeah, it's first part of December.
Right. Okay. So we would have to have something in place with you before you put that run board together.
Yep.
What's that mean?
Oh, sorry.
It's operator signups. So they pick their routes every 3 months.
Oh, okay, gotcha.
So we can only change our routes every 3 months.
I didn't know he said that.
Yeah.
So their next time they're doing is December 8th. So if we wanted, let's just for a second here, Dean. Let's just say we wanted to put the Elm route out there. Okay, that'd be about about 200,000.
Again, it'll depend on how often we want to run it. Because I was looking at it again when we were talking about the numbers. Some routes were like the Elm were at least hourly. Some other routes were like every 2 hours. So that probably was affecting some of the ridership numbers, but also where the cost will go. So really, it's going to be determined how many hours of service we want a day. Like I don't know if Diane's talked about her little pet project she's trying to get funding for.
Right.
It's just a matter of hourly costs, and you want to run it hourly every 2 hours. It's a different price. But we can figure that out. That's not a problem. It's just, what do we want to do? And what hours we want to run it? Or you guys, I should say.
Oh, no, and that's good
something
to
we-
know. That's good to know because we'll need to sit down and hash that out.
Yeah, that's something we can talk about, at least maybe to get the Elm road started back up.
Maybe Mike can bring to the board some different options that you guys throw out there,
Yeah, just let us know and we can put something together.
Okay.
And then you'll see what the cost is. And we're willing to work on the price too. That's what we did with the, unfortunately, ODOT, not be able to fund the last round. We kind of tried to reduce our cost to make it a little easier to do all the service. because we normally would do a fully allocated cost. But I was indirectly subsidizing the project to try and make it a little more fiscally feasible, but still it was a pretty big a chunk of money.
Keep that pencil sharpened.
Okay. That's all the questions I have. I want to thank everybody.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for doing this, and we'll be in touch. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.